It's Phil. All right, and I am live. And today I'd like to talk a little more about Post-Human Condition, the role-playing game that Journey and I are creating. One of the things that happens. And let's take a look at this wonderful piece of art that Journey posted. Makes me think of Please Sir, May I Have Another. This is from a Lamentations of the Flame Princess project that he's doing called The Punchline, and he's going to stream about it tonight. So now let's talk about the Post-Human Condition. One of the things that inspired me to create the world of the Post-Human Condition was a desire to explore what hadn't been explored, both in fiction and in role-playing games. So for example, Shadowrun, a great game, has dominated the cyberpunk with magic genre for decades. It's on its 5th edition. It's going strong. It's a lot of fun. But Shadowrun is full of some very familiar tropes. It has elves, dwarves, fireballs, orcs, and that's just the fantasy side. And so one of the things I wanted to do, for example, was to have a different set of races, and so we won't be having elves and dwarves. Sorry about that, folks. But we'll have a whole bunch of different races. We'll have humans, mutants. We'll have Nephilim, which is basically our term for mythological creatures like Selkies and Medusas, centaurs, that kind of thing. And we'll have those who've been augmented by strange science, because the science in Shadowrun is very normal. But don't forget about the Post-Human Condition. The gods have come. The alien gods have come. And with them comes a new understanding of science, influenced by the chaos that they bring. So when people get cool cybernetic enhancements, when they get their DNA modified, to maybe produce dermal plating on their skin or something, there's other stuff that comes with that. So one side of this is looking at this project sort of being like an answer in a way to Shadowrun. Shadowrun is one more thing that I thought was interesting. You can't get away from being a Shadowrunner. That is, and I wrote an essay about this for an essay contest sponsored by Zach Smith. But you can't, in Shadowrun, you can't get away from the game. That is, you can't get away from the shadows. You are presumed to be a criminal from the start, involved in this underground activity of Shadowrunning. That is, of being a corporate mercenary, but a freelance corporate mercenary. See, there's a difference. If you were a corporate mercenary who was, employed by a corporation, you'd have a decent social status. You could hope to retire one day. But as a freelancer, basically all the money you make is illegal money. In Shadowrun, you have the equivalent of a social security number called a SIN, and you can't put your ill-gotten gains in your real under your real SIN. Yeah, you just, the government would ask too many questions. So you end up having one of the things that almost every Shadowrun character buys is a fake SIN to do business under, because your business involves breaking and entering and possibly killing people. So from the beginning, you are in a tight spot, and it's really, really hard to leave that spot. How do you go legit? How do you launder your money? It just seems that the best way to do it would be to get more money, and maybe you can get a level 6 SIN. So such a great piece of forgery that it might never be discovered. But how do you get the money to do that, to pay? And so the way you get that money is by going on more of these missions, which are dangerous, since the corporations essentially see you as an expendable resource. And then, if you get that money, and you get an almost impenetrable SIN, what happens next? If you want to retire nicely, if you want to enjoy the fruits of your labor, what do you do? How do you earn a living? How can you go to? Okay, your character has all these skills based on jobs he can't put on a resume. So fine. Maybe one of your Johnsons, that is one of your corporate contacts, knows how good you are and is willing to vouch for you. But the kind of guy who would do that, the kind of corporation who'd want to hire you, let's say as a trainer, is probably involved in some dirty, nasty stuff. And even if it doesn't affect your conscience, it probably makes it a dangerous place to work. Your character is never going to take his big bundle of money. If even, by the way, it's hard to get that big bundle of money. And the temptation is always to buy the next piece of cyberware or buy the next big weapon and spend more and more of that money maintaining your status as an elite Shadowrunner. Yeah. So it's like a maze. It's hard to get out. It's part of the fun of the game, to be honest. Yeah. But one of the things that I want to do with the post-human condition is to allow players to get out of the game, or to not even assume that they're in it in the first place. You're going to be able to play lots of different characters, and so some characters will be decent, ordinary people caught up in situations beyond their control, because it's a crazy world, and there's no problem with that. Now, another game that greatly influenced me, another genre really, is cosmic horror, H.P. Lovecraft, and many other writers, and the role-playing game Call of Cthulhu. But one of the central premises of Call of Cthulhu, similar to Shadowrun, is that humanity's not getting out of this alive. And I reject that premise. Not because it's a bad premise, but because Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green and a couple other games have already done that really well. So, I'm looking at two games that I enjoy a lot, Shadowrun and Call of Cthulhu. I'm rejecting a central premise of both, and I guess in that way, that makes me think about the topic of this episode, which is B-sides, which is the alternates. I'm providing, and this game is an alternate to two very popular games, and Journey and I are going to do our best to make it as good as those two games, by the way. So in doing that, though, one of the things that I want to use to signal that is that I want to use different works of art. And by that, I mean music and literature and art and sculpture and film and poetry and television. But I don't want to reference the stuff that we always reference. There's a certain canon, even as much as we try to avoid it. I want to take a look at the things that are different. Like, for example, instead of the dominant superheroes, at least for a certain part of the generation, being the X-Men, what if it's the Doom Patrol? Okay, that's a thought. And or what if instead of the dominant horror writer in our imagination from the 19th century being Edgar Allan Poe, it's Nathaniel Hawthorne. And this is not just stuff that I would throw in the game book. Everybody loves Nathaniel Hawthorne, and people kind of forgot about Edgar Allan Poe. That's not how I would do it. What I would do is, instead of starting a chapter with a quote from Edgar Allan Poe, I'd start with a quote from Hawthorne. Instead of and instead, well, that's the one that's on my mind the most. So what I like from you is suggestions for anything that people have done in the creative field and creative fields that are as good as the stuff that's well known, but just not as popular. And again, that is art, that's music, that's fiction, that's poetry, that's comics, that's film, that's television, that's games. So if you're listening to this, give me some suggestions. I'd love to hear them, because that stuff will make it into the rule book as flavor text. That's about it. So I will see you all later. Good night.